bit louder for these incredible panelists? Thank you all for being here. I'm going to read your incredible bios and then also read a short description of the organization that they're representing, and I'll invite you to applaud for them as we go for each one. Sound good? Yeah? Sounds good? Say yeah? Yeah. Okay. You're in the building. The energy feels good. Thank you so much. So first, I'm going to introduce Amber Rose Howard. Woo, absolutely. Amber Rose Howard is a poet, public speaker, and organizer from Pomona, California. Experiencing a felony conviction as a young adult propelled Amber Rose into lifetime commitment to organizing against the prison industrial complex and building up the power of Black people and all others impacted by state violence. Amber Rose holds a BA in Communication Studies, concentrated in Public Argumentation and Rhetoric from California State University, San Bernardino. She is a graduate of the Women's Foundation of California, Women's Policy Institute Fellowship Program, and a proud member of All of Us or None. Amber Rose currently directs policy and budget advocacy as a statewide coordinator for Californians United for a Responsible Budget. So Amber Rose Howard and Ivette are representing CURB, and Ivette I'll introduce in a moment. CURB stands for Californians United for a Responsible Budget. CURB is a statewide coalition of 70 grassroots organizations working to reduce the number of people in prisons and jails, and the number of prisons and jails in the state, and shift state and local spending from corrections and policing to human services. Founded in 2003, our coalition amplifies the work of community leaders on issues from sentencing reform to conditions of confinement. We bridge movements for environmental, social, racial, and economic justice in California and across the nation. Please applaud Amber Rose Howard. Next person I will introduce is Ivette Ale. Ivette Ale is a grassroots organizer, LGBTQ community leader, and artist. Their experiences growing up in Southern California as an undocumented person and as the child of an incarcerated person have informed their activism throughout their career. They currently serve as the coordinator of the Justice LA Coalition and the statewide co-coordinator for Californians United for a Responsible Budget, CURB. Yvette is a graduate of the Women's Policy Institute and the Justice Policy Network Fellowship Programs, a member of Voices Neighborhood Council, and a graduate of University of California, Berkeley. They're a proud resident of South Los Angeles and enjoys bringing communities together as a global-based DJ. Please applaud Yvette Ale. Next, we have Eric Henderson. Eric Henderson, yes, woo, is the policy director at Initiate Justice. In this role, he works to advance Initiate Justice's legislative, budget, and ballot priorities in California. In addition to his role at Initiate Justice, Eric is an appointed member of the San Francisco Sentencing Commission and a member of the Board of State Community Corrections Executive Steering Committee for the Adult Reentry Grant. Prior to joining Initiate Justice, he worked as the policy associate at the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. Eric Henderson is representing Initiate Justice, a grassroots organization whose mission is to end mass incarceration by activating the power of the people it directly impacts. We organize our members both inside and outside of prisons to advocate for their well-being and change criminal justice policy in California. Initiate Justice has 12,400 inside or incarcerated members, 120 inside organizers, and hundreds more outside members and organizers throughout California. We are 100% led by people directly impacted by incarceration. Please applaud Eric Henderson. Energy electric already. Oh my goodness. I have two more amazing folks to introduce to you. Sandra Johnson. Yes. Y'all already know, is a community organizer and proud member of All of Us or None. She joined the team in 2017 as the first Elder Freeman Policy Fellow at LSPC, or Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, before she joined the staff as an organizer. Before coming to LSPC, Sandra received her AA degree in Health Education and Social Science at City College of San Francisco. Sandra is originally from Monterey, California, and is the oldest of 6 siblings. She draws from her own personal experiences coming from a single-parent household and having several formerly incarcerated loved ones. Her oldest brother is currently 31 years into a 17-to-life sentence. She is formerly incarcerated herself, having served 15 years in and out of the system. Her testimony and organizing was instrumental to passing the Fair Chance Act, AB 1008, and the RISE Act, SB 180, in 2017. Yes. Sandra Johnson is representing All of Us or None, a grassroots civil and human rights organization fighting for the rights of formerly and currently incarcerated people and their families. They're fighting against the discrimination that people face every day because of arrest or conviction history. The goal of All of Us or None is to strengthen the voices of people most affected by mass incarceration and the growth of the prison industrial complex. Through their grassroots organizing, they're building a powerful political movement to win full restoration of our human and civil rights. Please clap it up for Sandra Johnson. Lastly, I have the honor of introducing our esteemed moderator, Ericka Huggins. Yes. Ericka Huggins is a human rights activist, poet, educator, Black Panther leader, and former political prisoner. For the past 30 years, she has lectured throughout the United States and internationally. Her extraordinary life experiences have enabled her to speak personally and eloquently on issues relating to the physical and emotional well-being of women, children, and youth, whole being education, over-incarceration, and the role of spiritual practice in sustaining activism and promoting change. For lots of folks in the room, Ericka Huggins needs no introduction, so many different accomplishments that we could list, a 14-year tenure as the leader of the Black Panther Party, the longest of any women in leadership, writer and editor for the Black Panther Party's intercommunal news service, director of the Oakland Community School, and so much more. Please give all of your love and energy to Ericka Huggins and our amazing panelists.
So how are you, panelists?
Great.
So Amber Rose and Sandra and Ivette and Eric. What are we going to talk about? So, welcome everybody, and I hope you're already open to listening deeply and learning, and then taking action. So thank you for being here, all of you. Thank you to everybody who organized the event and who sustained SURJ as well. So, how many people are here who are not connected to SURJ? Great. So we wish the same for you, that you will walk away with some things to think about and take action on. And I don't assume at all, and neither do we, that this is an audience that isn't already active. I'm sure that many of you, or all of you, are in your own way. So my first question to you, esteemed panelists, is what brought you to the work of advocacy for incarcerated women, men, and youth? What brought you to it? What happened? Don't pass that mic to me.
Okay. So, hi everybody, and thank you for coming.
That one is okay.
Okay. Hi everybody, and thank you for coming. Well, as Ms. Huggins has said, that what Ericka has said is that what brought me to this work, first of all, I am also a formerly incarcerated person, and many of my family members also have been in prison, and like she said, I have a brother that is over 35 years in prison. When I first got released from incarceration, I relocated up here to the Bay Area from Monterey to give myself a chance. I found that it was super duper hard to come back into society from being in prison. I feel, this is an I statement, most of my criminal convictions was due to drug addiction. And I recycled in and out of prison for about 15 years because of drug addiction. I relocated up here, finally found a job and thought I was doing, you know, the right thing, paying taxes, going to work every day. And then in 2011, I was fired from working. I was pretty devastated and scared. I was scared because I was up here in a strange place, and I didn't have family up here, and I was too scared. I was scared, and I was too scared to go back because I was afraid that I was going to, you know, fall back into the same thing. So after I lost my job, I was invited to a town hall, and I spoke, and it just so happened at that town hall, it was some members of All of Us and None there. And they invited me to a meeting. Well, a lot of people invited me to their organization, but with All of Us and None, I remember them saying they were formerly incarcerated led. So I went to a few meetings. I went to the meetings for about a year, and Dorsey probably don't even remember me because I didn't hardly say nothing, but they were talking my language. And when I got fired from my job, I felt ashamed. You know, I really did. I went to school and I thought, oh, I better go better myself and make myself marketable for a job. So actually what brought me to this work was the horrible barriers that I faced when I came out of prison. I felt like I had did my time and that I deserved a better life. So when I started sitting and listening to people at All of Us and None, I knew that this was where I was supposed to be, that I needed to be here so that I could be a light for somebody else that was coming out of prison, having these difficult times, trying to come back and just do the right thing. So that's what brought me to this work.
Thank you, Sandra.
Hello, Sandra. Yes, thank you all for your ears and your hearts today. I think there's a few things that brought me to this work. And to start, I would say my parents, Rosemary and Ronnie. My father grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was born in 1953, and my mother was raised in Watts mostly, in South Central, also born in 1953. And in retrospect, I realized that I had really radical parents. And the things that they instilled in me and the stuff that they put in my heart helped bring me to a space where there was no other answer for me but to become an organizer and an advocate for people who live my experience or have similar lived experiences. Another thing that brought me, I think, to this work is a really, really broken heart. I think growing up before I had my own experience with the criminal justice system, I read a lot, which is where I met Ericka for the first time in books and reading about Black liberation and about other liberation movements in the US that came before my time, and really just being so pulled in by all of the stories and all of the work that had happened before me. And I think at that point, just learning about all of the liberation work that had happened, I wanted to be involved but didn't really know like where exactly I would fit in and where I would make the most impact. And unfortunately, the California corrections system made that decision for me because when I was 18 years old, I was convicted of a serious violent felony. I had a broken heart after that experience, not only because of moving through the court's process, not only because of the conviction and because of the punishment that I received afterwards, but mostly because of the realization that the punishment would never end. I had completed high school after I was first arrested. I was fortunate enough to be bailed out, and my family was able to get a private attorney. So me navigating the system with a serious violent charge looks so much different than so many other people who come from communities like mine. I'm from Pomona. I know y'all heard that in my bio, but I be repping my town. And so I think after being convicted, I had continued. I finished my college degree. I got my record expunged, and then like doors just kept slamming. Like doors, I would get in somewhere and like, yeah, I'm finna use this fancy little degree I got, paid a whole lot of money, and then I would be let in the door, and then I would be pushed out, and it would be locked. Like, nope, we actually, we're gonna recant that job offer because you actually have a record. So I experienced folks who weren't even supposed to have access to my record using my record against me, because my record is expunged. So there are certain entities and businesses and organizations that are not supposed to have access to my record, but they did, and they definitely used it against me. And so I was just like I finally got a job at a private organization that didn't do background checks, right? Not really making enough money to live, but just happy that I was somewhere, but still frustrated, like, what's happening, you know what I mean? Like that's part of my life is over. It had been like 7 years past at that time, and so I'm like, I should be able to move forward, like, and that was actually communicated to me in court. The judge said it, prosecution said it, my public defender said it, my private attorney said it, everyone said, you get convicted, you do your time, you get an expungement, and it's like it never happened. That was the story. And so I'm sitting here at work like, this is crazy, like, what am I gonna do about this? Like, obviously I'm not the only person who is living this experience. So I started doing a little digging, a little more researching. I got in contact with a cousin of mine who works at Community Build, which is in the heart of Los Angeles. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna start sending you jobs. Like, I know a whole bunch of folks who are like, the stupid term that we all hate, felon friendly, right? So he's like, I'm gonna send you stuff. And one day as I'm looking through all this stuff, I got an email that was he forwarded me an email from a New Way of Life reentry project in Los Angeles. And so the thing that made me open the email is because it said, it was an organizing program that was going to teach you skills to organize for formerly incarcerated people. And so when I opened the email, it said, requirement, you must be formerly incarcerated. I was like, yeah, because like everything else I was reading was like, you can't have a felony, you can't, like I was excluded from everything. And this is the first email I opened in a while that was like, you must have gone through this experience in order for us to consider you. So I like jumped out of my chair, filled out the application. Susan Burton, who is the founder and executive director of A New Way of Life, and Tiffany Johnson, who's the former associate director of New Way of Life, both called me and was like, we read over your application, you're supposed to come in for an interview, but basically we want you, so don't not come in for the interview. So I showed up and I went through this training program. It's called Women Organizing for Justice and Opportunity. And I went through that. I live about 50 miles outside of LA, and if anybody knows Southern California, that 50-mile drive actually takes 2 hours if you're in midday traffic. So I was driving from the Inland Empire to LA to be a part of this program, to learn from them. The focus of our education there was Michelle Alexander's book, A New Jim Crow, right? And so luckily I had already read the book before we got there, so I was even more excited to like unpack it with people who were also impacted. So I did that, and at the end of that training, Susan Burton approached me and was like, we want you to be an organizer for All of Us or None in Watts and in Long Beach. And I'm like, yes, I'm quitting my job right now. Are you kidding me? So I quit my job. I got involved at A New Way of Life and was organizing for All of Us or None for a couple of years. Learned so much and really just found my community, found folks who understood my experience and who had the same passion and drive to like dismantle the thing that caused our experience in the first place. And just really blew my mind with the amount of work that had already been laid down before I even realized it was being laid down. and has grown me into the organizer that was able to step into my role at CURB to further the work that I've been doing to break down the prison industrial complex. So, long story long, my life experience and being formerly incarcerated and really hurting behind it is what brought me to this work.
Thank you. Well, first I want to say I'm so happy to be in Oakland today. So happy to be here. These are my old stomping grounds. This is where I started organizing over 10 years ago. I started organizing with Centro Legal de la Raza. I helped their legal clinics as a pre-law student at Berkeley. Shout out to Latino Pre-Law Society. And I worked with Justice Now. I was part of their participatory documentation of human rights violations in the prisons of Chowchilla. They gave me my framework for abolition and really set the course for me in terms of a career and a lifelong organizing pursuit. But my history and the impetus for this work actually started many years before. So my family immigrated to the US when I was little from Mexico. We fled due to drug violence. And I grew up in Los Angeles in the 90s, in the middle of the war on drugs that landed my dad in jail, in prison, and then deportation centers. And as the child of an incarcerated parent, a parent who was our primary breadwinner, our family ended up homeless. And we had no access to resources. We were undocumented, so we couldn't access a lot of resources. We had no family here. And part of the reason why my dad was incarcerated was the violence that he inflicted on us. But for families like mine, locking up my dad was not the solution. In fact, that only exacerbated the problem for us. We were left with very little to sustain us. And the narratives around the survivors of violence are often co-opted. They're told for us. We're expected to be the poster children for why people should be locked up, but that was not my story. We wanted my dad home. We just wanted him to have services and mental health treatment and substance use treatment, and we wanted stable housing and access to food and employment. And so it was kind of twisted that ultimately I received my green card because my dad was prosecuted. And it was something, or is something that to this day is really heavy for me to hold. And so organizing for me was that outlet where I felt I had community. There were other folks, other children of incarcerated loved ones that may have experienced harm, but didn't believe incarceration was the solution. I'm also a member of the queer community, and I organized in the Bay Area within Castro for All. And organizing within the queer community, you really see the intersection of incarceration and patriarchy and homophobia really colliding. And so part of the reason why I organize is the intersection of my various identities and seeing how that's played out in my community, in my family, and in my life. And so now I am very lucky to be organizing with CURB. Little did I know that Justice Now was actually one of the founding members of CURB. And in the last couple of years, I've really come full circle with my organizing family, having the opportunity to work with Amber Rose, everyone here on the stage, actually, in advocacy work, pushing for transformative legislation that's informed by an abolitionist framework. And I thank Justice Now for that, and all the folks in the Bay Area that were my teachers through that process. So, yeah, that's it.
I don't even know how I can follow, and all of the Amber, Rose, Ivette, and Sandra are dear friends of mine, really close, and I feel so honored to be on the stage with you all tonight. Similar to everyone on this stage, my connection to this work is a personal connection. My father was incarcerated before I was born and moved to California to get away from his circumstances. My brother was in and out of prison for 8 years while I was growing up, and I too have had experience in the system as both a juvenile and as an adult. And you know, I realized through my own personal experience going through the system that the things that prevented me from going back into the system were things that were outside of my control. My family's education level, my family had jobs, they owned a house, and I was able to come home and really be supported by my family when I was in some of the lowest parts of my life. And it really was a deep source of shame for me, my contact with the criminal justice system. And then in college, well, I should say, but also it was a deep source of shame for me, but it was the impetus for me to get back into college because I had a lot of time on my hands, and I ended up getting education, and through my education really realized how bad the system was, and came back here to the Bay Area to do work, and have met some of my closest friends, some of whom are here in the room tonight, and I appreciate all of you here. Helping me learn and organize and train me, and learning from the people who have been doing this work for so much longer than I have. This work just always feels so deeply personal, and I appreciate to be able to work not for people who are in the system or have contact with the system, but with them, because they have the answers and we're here to support their leadership.
Thank you, each of you. And I'm sitting here with the huge awareness that each of us is impacted directly by those two words that don't make sense, criminal justice. First of all, what is a crime? I'm not asking you that question. I'm telling you what's going on in my head. What's a crime and who are criminals? That's for all of us to think about. Who are the criminals? Because there are people that just don't go to jail or prison or anywhere else that's dark and lonely and non-rehabilitative, you know? So I want to say that I really appreciate you for everything that you're doing. And it's impossible once you've been incarcerated or have a loved one who is, not to want to go back and give, isn't it? So there are ways in which it becomes a cause for some. So I want to thank you for saying that it's very personal. And I think that it doesn't have to be a cause, and it doesn't have to be personal if our hearts are open and if our minds quit looping about what do we do. We're all humans. So thank you. I was very touched to listen to you. So the next question, there have been important victories and shifts in the movement to dismantle the prison system in California, and I would say beyond, in the past 6 years. So can you each inform us, or you don't each have to speak, but can you inform us of some of these victories?
Yeah, I can start. My organization, Initiate Justice, was founded around Proposition 57 work. For those who are not familiar, Proposition 57 was a ballot initiative on the 2016 ballot that was overwhelmingly voted in by voters, 68%. Shout out to Taina, who just walked in the door. She's right on time to hear me talk about Proposition 57. So Proposition 57 did three things. It eliminated district attorney's ability to try a juvenile as an adult. Now, a judge has to make that determination. It created a non-violent early parole process for people inside because we saw people with incredibly long sentences who didn't need to be inside, who weren't being rehabilitated, and this created a process for them to come home sooner. And then it created a credit earning process that we're still working on right now to clean up through AB 65, through some other demands that Curb and Initiate Justice and many other members have signed on to a demand letter. But people are able to get good time credits. They're able to earn time off for participating in education, for participating in vocational programs, and for participating in leisure time activity groups. And Proposition 57 was huge. A lot of people are coming home now because of it, and I think that's one of the biggest wins that I've personally worked on in the last 6 years.
So some of you may have heard that we stopped 2 jails in Los Angeles a couple of months ago. So for a little context, Los Angeles County had approved a $3.5 billion jail expansion plan to build 2 new jails. A women's jail that would be out in Lancaster. So for those that don't know SoCal geography, it would be about 80 miles away from LA City proper. And it would be on toxic soil. The second jail would have been a mental health jail to replace Men's Central, which is an oxymoron. Nobody gets well in a cell, jails are inherently violent, perpetuate trauma, all the things that community knows. And yet the county still was moving forward with this jail plan. For over 7 years, community had fought back against these jails from being built. And even a year ago, there are folks, even within the movement, that were like, damn, this is hard. Like, we don't know if we're gonna be able to stop this whole jail plan. They had already approved it. They approved the environmental impact report. They were moving forward with it. They were planning on breaking ground within a few months. And all the work of organizers on the ground for over 7 years finally broke through. And so the supervisors in LA County voted to stop the women's jail outright. And then they transformed or renamed the mental health jail into a mental health center. So it would essentially be a 3,800 bed asylum, which functions as a jail, has the same footprint as a jail. And so now the current fight, and this is a way that y'all can get activated, is around what does mental health treatment look like in our communities. So although we're still engaging in a fight to stop this asylum from being built, we completely shifted the landscape and the narrative around whether or not LA should build a jail. Now the question is, what does mental health treatment look like? And that in and of itself is a huge victory. And we also, it's huge. We also were able to get the supervisors to create an alternative to incarceration work group. This is something that organizers, folks on the ground, community has been asking for. A body that allows the community to weigh in around what alternatives should look like in LA County. And in fact, we have several of our organizers appointed to that work group. We've been able to box out probations and the sheriff in that space, and in fact, we boxed them out from the final motion to approve this mental health center. So they're not even included in terms of who would be running it. The health departments would be running it. We still think it's archaic. We haven't seen a 3,800 bed asylum since like mid-1800s London. It's absolutely absurd. But we're now working with this work group within the county to push our vision for alternatives that are decentralized, that are community-based, community-run, that are informed by those that are directly impacted by the system. And so we're really excited about that shift. And then the second, I guess, win I'm going to talk about is around pretrial reform, which kind of informed how and why we won the jail fight. So sometimes a loss isn't always a loss and a win isn't always a win. And when it comes to SB 10, I think that is really appropriate. So how many of you are familiar with SB 10? Okay. So it was a statewide bill that essentially ended the use of money bail in California. However, not so fast. Hold your applause. However, it replaced money bail with what are called algorithmic-based risk assessment instruments. It's a mouthful. They're essentially these formulas that calculate a person's risk of failure to appear or getting rearrested, but they look at data like a person's zip code, their arrest record, their gender, their age, to determine that risk score, much like a credit score. And so for Los Angeles, the county predicted that if SB 10 is implemented, it would actually more than double our jail population. So early last year, Justice LA, the coalition that's been fighting the jail fight for the last few years in Los Angeles, wrote a letter to the board and said, hey, we need you to voice opposition to SB 10. It would be harmful for Los Angeles. And it fell on deaf ears. Once SB 10 passed, and then they saw what it implied for Los Angeles and the jail population, they came back to us and they're like, all right, what do we do? And so that cracked open a conversation and engagement with the supervisors that hadn't been there before. They started actually taking their policy cues from us. And so another major victory was a bail reform motion that passed in February, which community actually redlined. So we worked with one of the supervisor's offices to inform what that motion would be, and it included naming this funding stream, AB 109, which essentially had been all going to the sheriffs and probations. It included that as a possible funding stream for building out capacity for community-based organizations. Risk assessments are still included. We're still fighting back on that. But now, within the Alternatives to Incarceration work group, we are building out a different pretrial model for Los Angeles that includes community as part of that process, as part of pretrial services. So there have been a lot of really exciting changes. The board also approved several studies to look at the mental health population, to look at the needs of women in Los Angeles, to inform what types of services should be created that are not carceral, that are not punitive, that are a public health approach to public safety. So the reframing of what public safety means in the last few months has really been incredible, and I'm really excited for what's happening in Los Angeles, and I'm really excited to see how that informs the rest of the state, how that informs the Bay Area and the Inland Empire and the Central Valley, areas that are often not touched as heavily by organizing as these metropolitan hubs. So yeah, victories in Los Angeles, they have been plenty, but there's a lot of work to be done.
So, I have a couple that I want to talk about too. When I first started my fellowship at All of Us or None, I had lost my job. And they were working on AB 1008, the Fair Chance. Actually, it was ban the box. It was, so this bill this policy they're working on was very dear to me because I had just lost my job because of a criminal conviction. So I'll tell you, AB 1008, when they renamed it, I think they renamed it to make it sound good, but it was actually banning the box to me. So this policy helped remove the question from a job application where they could ask you up front on a job application, have you been convicted of a felony? So it was, to me, it was a huge barrier for employment. And for me, coming out of prison, if for people that was formerly incarcerated, we need a job. You know, a job starts everything. In order for us to pay our rent, in order to buy our food, in order for us to take care of our families, we need to work. And it would be dangerous for us as formerly incarcerated people, at least for me, not to be able to work, because then I would have to fall back into survival mode, taking care of myself some other way. So I testified, and I was able to at these committees make people understand that coming out of prison, we must work. And so they banned the box. They could still ask you about your background. However, Fair Chance gave us a chance to get through the process of the interview, and you know, and for people to be able to see me for me, not for that box that was on this application. Because we all know that once you check that box, it's over. They're not going to call you back. They don't even care. So, however, like I said, they can still ask you about your history, but they can't ask you until after the conditional offer. And also it has to be, and it also helps weed out discrimination, because if you don't have a direct nexus to the job that you're applying for, your background, then that shows that they're discriminating against you because of your background. The other bill that I worked on was SB 180, and that was the 3-year prior drug conviction. And for me, that was an extremely important bill too, because I would be sentenced over and over and over for a prior because I was addicted to drugs. So SB 180 was really dear to me, because it was, to me, it was just common sense. Send me to a program. Don't send me to prison because of my prior drug conviction. Send me to a program. Send me some, you know, I was never offered any help for what I was going through. So SB 180 was another bill that I worked on. And both of them got passed in 2017.
Wonderful. I was going to say exactly the same things that Sandra said. Excited about Ban the Box ordinance in LA that I helped work on while I was here none, and then SB 180, which is the first time that the California State Legislature voted to repeal a sentencing enhancement. So it was a big deal. It was a big deal. Yes, and it lays the groundwork for so much more work that that has come forward and that will come forward.
So, what's an important focus moving forward? There have been victories, and I know some setbacks as well. That's how it goes. But what's an important focus?
I would say an important focus in thinking about all of the victories that have happened and the things that are coming now is implementation. So when we look at the bills, like for example in the policy area, you look at so many of the policies that have passed, including Senate Bill 180, which repealed the 3-year sentencing enhancements for prior drug convictions. And then you look at since 2017, like how do we actually implement that so that folks who are currently incarcerated under that enhancement are actually brought out of jails. Most of the people who have that enhancement are incarcerated in county jail. And I think even when policies are passed that are not retroactive, it's an important focus of people who are doing this work to figure out how to best implement those things and how to hold authorities accountable to making sure that they're implemented.
Thank you. Another important focus, implementation in and of itself is major, across, spanning the whole spectrum. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Implementation like I spoke about in Los Angeles, just being able to influence the way that now a public health approach is being taken in Los Angeles, following that through is important. But I would also say, in this moment, also continuously building the capacity of the organizations that are led by directly impacted people. With these wins also come funding opportunities. And so being able to leverage that moment to support the organizations that have been doing this work for decades, that have been on the front lines when there was no funding. There was a time when the jail fight in Los Angeles had very, very little support. And it wasn't mainstream, it wasn't cool, it wasn't flashy. But there were folks on the front lines that were putting their bodies on the line to stop these jails. And so really leveraging that moment to highlight that history and that work, and also highlighting the abolitionist framework that has allowed for this moment to happen. It wasn't reformist reforms, it was not leaving anyone behind. It was the families and the community members that were incarcerated in those jails that have been leading that work. So supporting them and supporting the organizations that they lead.
Yeah, in addition to all of the implementation is so important. We are still working on Prop 57 implementation right now, and that was 3 years ago at this point. And also the sentence enhancements, removing sentencing enhancements. People are there longer on enhancements than they are on base terms. And people have not been resentenced in accordance to current law, and we need to focus on that. I would also say a big part of my work has been around the costs of incarceration. It is expensive to go through the system. There are charges at every point in the process that you are not aware of, and there have been a lot of wins here, both in Alameda County and San Francisco. Now there's a bill at the state level to eliminate the fees that are associated with incarceration. I mean, it's $140 for a pre-sentence report. It's, what is it, $50 a month to get on ankle monitor. They want their money up front. They don't want it in a payment plan, or you have to stay inside. And then even when you're inside, the costs don't go away. This year we're working on a bill, Assembly Bill 45, that will eliminate the medical and dental co-payments inside of CDCR and in jails. Right now, if you ask to go to the doctor, it's $5. That is the equivalent to you or I paying $700 to see the doctor. For people that don't make money in county jails, nobody in county jail gets any income, earns any income. Nobody, people in CDCR, the average pay rate, if you get paid for your job, is 8 cents an hour. So that can be a month or up to 3 weeks of someone's salary. So it's a huge barrier for people. Incarceration is really expensive. People most likely to be incarcerated are already low income, so we're just literally kicking people while they're down. So focusing on bringing people home and then eliminating the cost of incarceration and focusing on refunds for some of these costs that people have had to pay. They did it for youth. They're working on it on the youth right now. We're trying to do it on the adult system, and we need to put money back in people's pockets for the unfair sentencing and contact with the system.
So I think an important focus moving forward is equality, that all of us deserve our human and civil rights, and for us all to be equal and have a chance at a better life. I just really want to say that it's important for everyone to know, regardless if you have skin in the game or not, that your freedom is intertwined with my freedom. So, just remember, moving forward, that I feel that we were all created equal, and that we should have equality, especially after we've paid our debt to society. So.
Thank you all. Can some of you, you don't all have to respond, but you might want to. Can you shed light on myths about prison abolition? And myths about prison abolition and the existing U.S. prison system. By the way, the United States incarcerates more people than any other place in the globe, and California being one of the highest in incarcerating human beings. So, some myth busting.
Okay, I have a thought on that.
Okay. Come on, Sandra.
Okay. So, I've been on, you know, I don't believe, and I'm gonna just be honest.
Please.
Okay. So I've been on both sides of the street with the violence of, I was a victim of a violent crime. My son was murdered in 1997, and my brother is in prison for murder, second-degree murder. So when my son got murdered, I wanted someone punished, you know. But I had to realize that no matter how I felt, the pain that I was feeling behind that, I had to let that go, because at the same time I was fighting to get my brother out of prison. So I believe that there should be some punishment for certain crimes, but in the United States, for me, this is the only country that will lock you up and throw away the key. They over-punish you. Because when the young man that shot my son and killed my son, they started calling me to come to the hearings to try to keep him in. And I realized that that was going to keep me stuck where I was. You know, with all the pain and the hurt and everything. And I just felt like I have been going to visit my brother and fighting to get my brother out. And it's still fighting to get my brother out. And will always fight until my brother walks these streets. But I knew that I couldn't be fighting to get my brother out and fighting to keep that young man in. You know, I believe that I see my brother change, and I do believe in rehabilitation, even if the United States prison system don't believe in rehabilitation. So for me, I don't know much about abolition, but I do know that people will change. And I think that's all I have to say. That, like, I really struggled with this question when I was thinking, when I read it. I just believe that I believe that some people should be punished, but it's the length of time that they should be punished for. You know, people change. So that's it.
And Sandra, I told you this before, I'm so sorry that all of this has happened. For you, for your son, your brother, your entire family. And it has impact for generations, doesn't it, when we're impacted in this way? Again, I say, this is not a cause. This is a service to humanity, what we're doing, what you're doing. So, thank you, Sandra.
I think one of the big myths around abolition is that there is no accountability. So abolition is not the absence of accountability. In fact,
That's right.
It's a restorative form of accountability that actually makes our communities safer. So if you think about the prison system, the way it perpetuates violence both inside and outside through policing, through extraction, whether it's financial or the bodies of our family members. It's actually pulling us apart. It's destabilizing families. It's actually making people more traumatized inside. And most folks that enter prison will eventually come back to their communities. And so what are they coming back home to? What kind of world are we investing in, right? Are the money that we're spending on prisons, we're not spending that on healthcare, we're not spending that on mental health treatment, on housing, on education. We're divesting from communities, or have been divesting from communities for generations, and extracting folks, disappearing our communities entirely. And so abolition questions that entire system. It challenges it, and it allows us to envision and reimagine what our communities can look like without cages and without policing. So much of abolition sometimes centers around ending like the physical, or people's ideas of abolition, like ending like the physical structures, ending jails, ending prisons, like tearing them down. But it's also about ending the surveillance of our communities, the policing our communities, punitive measures to harm. All of that, ending all of that is abolition. And restoring our communities is abolition.
Yes.
I think what's special about CURB is that we come to that sort of idea all the time in our discussions on how we build the coalition's work, on what we're going to push forward, on what we will keep our hands out of. All of that we consider abolitionist reform, and then we consider what reformist reform looks like. I think it's important to understand that with the goal of abolition, which is of course breaking down the prison industrial complex as it stands, and with restoring society to a new vision, without prisons, without corrections, without punishment as the answer to public safety, that we have to first consider one thing: everybody has to be included in that. There cannot be the dichotomy that exists, the binaries that exist between us saying this population is deserving of being restored to community and this is not. We can't have that exist when we're thinking in abolitionist perspectives. We have to think always of the system, of it being a systemic thing, of an intentional structure, and that's how we're able to move forward in abolitionist perspectives. I think when we think through reform, and a lot of times when you're talking to like radical abolitionists, they're like, reform, they don't want to hear that, right? But I think what we have to realize is that reform and prison reform has actually helped move us toward some abolitionist perspectives. I think that they are building blocks to get us to abolition. One of the examples that I think the CURB Coalition can hold in that, a recent example, is in a policy that we were part of last year. It was Senate Bill 1393, authored by Senator Holly Mitchell. Now this particular bill, and there was a lot of stuff up last year. We had the felony murder rule changed. We had, there were so many police accountability bills up there. And this bill, all it did was say, it didn't repeal the enhancement, but it said the judges now have the discretion to apply the enhancement or not. That doesn't look like an abolitionist policy. It's not removing something, it's not breaking it down. It reformed the way that this harmful policy can be applied. But in that, and just since January 1st, when the bill was signed, we've already seen over 70 people sent back to court for resentencing so that the judge can decide whether or not this can apply. It still leads us up to a space where we're bringing people back home from prison. And of course we have to do that if we want to not only take down these physical structures, but have people restored back to the community to help us build forward. I think we have to consider, the important thing to consider when you're thinking about reform is, how do we hold the idea of being all-inclusive? How do we hold that line of, okay, we can take this reform, but we need to make sure that it doesn't carve people out? I think reform builds us toward abolition, but in order to do that, we have to make sure that we're remaining all-inclusive. And we actually fought with this policy, is such a great example, because we fought really hard to make sure that nobody was carved out. And when I say carved out, I'm talking about, you'll see stuff where folks are like, yeah, let's do this forward, but we're gonna exclude people with these kinds of convictions. We don't want them to benefit from this. We fought tooth and nail at the state level to make sure that nobody was excluded from that policy. And I think in all reforms across the board, when you're thinking through the work that all of us do, you have to consider who you're leaving behind, because the danger in when you're moving forward reform and leaving folks behind is that you're setting yourself up for them to continue to be left behind, and you're leaving a piece of that structure solid so that it can be built upon again. So I think it's definitely important to not just dismiss reform, but we have to be very careful and strategic about the way we move about it in abolition.
And the next question I'd like for you, Amber Rose, and you, Ivette, to answer. Just chime in on each other. What does it mean to be involved in statewide organizing to make local change?
Definitely important question, and I think the CURB Coalition has informed my response to that, definitely. Looking at the work that we can move on a state level, and looking at the state structure for prisons and cages. What you can help move at a state level definitely will inform what you can do at the local level, and vice versa. I think in CURB's work as a statewide coalition, the importance of it is that we're plugging people in and having like a consistent network of folks in all regions of this state who talk about how the issues are impacting folks in all of these regions. And it brings us to a place where we're able to agree on work that would move the state forward. And then also it leaves behind information on how each county can actually build off of those things to forward that work in the county. The importance of a statewide work is the alignment that can happen between all of the work that's happening in different regions. If we can align the work, and if we can have everyone sort of in the same flow and in the same movement and agreement on what's going on, then I think the work becomes stronger, which is why I think over 15 years, the CURB Coalition has had so much movement and has helped move so many things. Keeping the connection and the networks and the communication tight and thinking through how we can move forward this state definitely informs how we can move forward counties. And then when you think about counties and the local work that's happening, for example, and I think Ivette will dig a little bit deeper into this, locally in LA, what's happened with the jail fight work, that actually had been informed previously by what was happening in Alameda. And that had been informed previously by what had happened in San Francisco. Like Justice LA as a coalition had to invite down folks from the Alameda jail fight, folks from the San Francisco jail fight, folks from San Diego who had been in the jail fight, talk to folks all across the state to think through what are the right strategies? How can we learn from what happened in different counties in order to make this action in this county successful? And I think that's the best part about having a statewide coalition. Not only do we build on the victories of one another, but when we see that stuff didn't work out, we actually can learn from one another on how to move the work forward.
So Amber Rose mentioned the RISE Act, SB 180. So that would actually bring folks home and has brought folks home from the jails. That's a piece of statewide legislation that CURB pushed that has direct implications in terms of the jail fight. Because if we're able to chip away at the jail population through statewide legislation, that helps our arguments and our work to stop jail expansion. Bail reform is another one. So, like I mentioned earlier, SB 10, the predictions coming out of Los Angeles is that it would actually increase our jail population. And because of that, we were able to move the supervisors on a more radical vision of jail depopulation and moving away from jail expansion. So it was the statewide work that helped inform the local work. Another example is the 50% campaign that came out of Alameda. The campaign sought to shift 50% of the sheriff's AB 109 budget. It's a funding stream that's tied to local counties. And so in LA, a group with the Women's Policy Institute, that including our predecessor, Diana Zuniga, and other organizers, sought to replicate that in Los Angeles. And so we built on that within Justice LA to advocate for properly funding pretrial services through this specific budget stream. And so being able to be part of a statewide coalition that gets to learn from each other's campaigns, that is able to have access to each other's expertise and genius, has really helped bolster the local campaigns, and we're hoping will help replicate some of the victories that happen in Los Angeles and other parts of the state.
Are you learning a lot? So this question is for you, Sandra. The event tonight was initiated originally to support Quest for Democracy Day on and this is an annual statewide advocacy day in Sacramento, sponsored by Legal Services for Prisoners with Children and All of Us or None. So can you tell us about what will take place in Sacramento on May 20th? What day is May 20th?
May 20th is a Monday.
Okay. And also tell us how people here can be of support.
Okay. So actually Quest for Democracy is 2 days. It's May 19th and 20th. And on the 19th, that's a Sunday, we bus people from all over California to Sacramento. We house them, we lodge them, we put them up in housing. That's a travel day. We do small trainings after everyone get there. And then on May 20th, we have this huge rally where we invite legislators out to speak to the crowds of the formerly incarcerated people that are going up there and advocate for bills that is most important to them. I had to write some little notes because this is a lot. Okay. So yeah, we train them to do legislative visits and we teach them to speak in their own voices, you know. So on this day, we also invite our allies of goodwill up there to come and support us. So what I would like to do, because I couldn't wait to ask this question. Okay. How you can support us is I'm asking 75 people from this audience to go up to all of us in that table where the iPads are and sign up and come up to Sacramento with us to support us in our struggle for democracy. For money. Thank you. After Quest for Democracy, we continue to do follow-up with legislators and their staffers, and we build relationship with them so that in case, when we want to go up there and talk to them about other policies, they're open the door for us. So tonight, I would love for you guys to come up there and support us with our struggle.
Do you need funding also?
Always we need money.
Just check.
Because we are actually bringing 7 buses from all over California. And that is a lot. We're funding this, and we're putting up, we have a whole hotel, and then we're buying them all lunches, and then we're doing shirts, t-shirts, and we're doing everything, but I ain't good with asking for money, but please give us some. Please give us some. You can donate,
Okay,
this is
thank you. That's the best fundraising pitch I've heard. And you'll hear more about fundraising in a little bit. Thank you, Sandra. And so Eric, my brother in name.
Yes, Ericka?
So what is the role of restorative practices in the movement to support incarcerated people? And I always want to bring incarcerated youth. Every time I think about the place on 150th that's called Juvenile Justice something something. Again, how does justice, how does that word fit in the title? But that's not really what I'm asking. I'm asking you about restorative practices and how they impact the lives of people who are incarcerated while we're working toward abolishing prisons.
Yeah, I mean, this work right now is centering a lot on restorative justice and transformative justice. We want to take out this punitive system of incarceration and incorporate more restorative justice practices and principles. So instead of, right now the way that the system is currently set up, a victim actually has very little say in how the person who caused harm to them is sentenced and what they're actually sentenced to. I may not want someone to go to prison. I may actually want them to do community service. I may not want them to do anything. And the system is not set up in a way that actually is truly victim-centered. We do there's a lot of restorative justice practices that is happening right now in prisons. I was part of a program that goes into San Quentin every week and does restorative justice circles inside the prisons. And it always felt odd to me because I would go behind prison walls to have a healing moment, in a really punitive place. And I would always say, is this odd to you that we're doing this in here and we feel healed? I think that we need to incorporate more restorative justice practices into our work with each other and with the people that we're supporting. We can't talk about banging on the system and then I'm banging on you in your organization or just in community with you. We need to work together collectively. I think a lot of people are drawn to this work as a process of healing. We come to this work to help each other so we can also heal in turn. And I think that we need to just remember that when we're working with each other and supporting the people that are inside.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have one question, a final one, and this is for all of you to answer. We already know there's so much to be done. All of you have said that, and you're part of the doing. And so are many people here. So, can you tell us ways that people can support the work of your particular organizations? There's so much to be done, and there's already so much being done. How can people support? Not just on one day, like May 20th, but ongoing to sustain the work of your organizations. So who'd like to talk for, oh, you have the mic,
I
right?
got the mic, so I'm gonna start. I think the way that they can support, you all can support Initiate Justice is coming and attending our events. We have monthly Bay Area meetups and also Los Angeles meetups, but we have a need for volunteers every single day. We have over 13,000 people on our mailing list that receive a quarterly newsletter from us. That number grows every single day. When you mail 13,000 people, the word gets out about your organization, and we need help responding to the letters. It's a really good way to learn about policy. It's also a really good way to just like pitch in and throw down. I think another way that people can help support us is, in addition to financial contributions, I'm really good at asking for money, so one way you can tangibly support Initiate Justice is donating to our work. Almost everybody on our staff is impacted by incarceration in one way, and we're really truly focusing on centering the leadership of people who are currently incarcerated. The people who are inside have these solutions, and we're not telling them what to do. We are getting direction from them and fulfilling what they want us to do for them. So come to our events, donate to us, support in other ways, tell your friends about us, like our Facebook posts, like our Twitter posts, call our elected officials when our bill's coming to the floor, and refer people to us. We just started a program called the Institute of Impacted Leaders that is training formerly incarcerated individuals and their family members in policy and advocacy, and to develop their voice and do visits, and it's been really powerful. We're on our first cohort, starting a second cohort in both the Bay and LA. So let people know that we have this program going on.
Well, I've already asked you for money. So I'm gonna ask you for some more. But really, seriously, we're based right here in Oakland now. We're right here in Oakland, so we're up here at 4400 Market. And I would love, if you don't know about the Freedom of Movement Center, I would love for you to come and tour it and support what we're doing up there. We have monthly meetings. We answered hundreds and hundreds of letters every week. From inside, from people inside. And we send them resources, we send them toolkits, we send them information how to advocate for themselves. So actually today, I was thinking about we used to do letter writing night, and so we definitely need volunteers for that. And you can talk to me after this too. I think that if you don't know about all of us or legal services for prisons with children and what we do, please go on the website, read about us, stop by. We have events, come and support our events, support our bills, get behind what we are doing as formerly incarcerated people. So that's what I'm gonna ask you to do.
Thank you. So tell us the name of the website again.
curbprisonspending.org.
Great. I love that. So thank you very much, each of you, for taking an evening when you could be resting. And I do hope you're taking care of yourselves. I can tell you from personal experience that if you do not take care of yourself while you're taking care of others, the wheels fall off. I know you know, because you're doing it. So, thank you, Eric. Thank you, Ivette. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Amber Rose. You are precious gems.
Please keep that applause going, that ovation going for all of our panelists and our moderator, Ericka Huggins.
I would like to thank all of you for taking time from your evening to listen mindfully and to open your hearts in ways that maybe weren't so before you walked in. And maybe also thank you for being inspired to do more. So thank you. Once again, thank you.